All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to Inside Intelligence, brought to you by the Intelligence Analysis Program and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features Dr. Barry Zulauf discussing moral courage and intelligence. My name is Peter Huggins, and I am the event producer. Please note today's program will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Inside Intelligence playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion of the event. For more information on the Intelligence Analysis Program, please visit advanced.jhu.edu/intelligence analysis. With that, I will turn over the event to our moderator, Dr. Michael J. Ard, Program Director and Senior Lecturer for the Master of Science in Intelligence Analysis Program.
Thank you very much, Peter. Welcome, everyone, to Inside Intelligence. Today, we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Barry Zulauf. Let me introduce our guest. He's the president of the International Association for Intelligence Education and is the ODNI referent at the Center for the Study of Intelligence. He recently was an Intelligence Fellow at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard's Kennedy School. Dr. Zulauf was the chief of the Solutions Division, executive secretary of the National Intelligence Analysis Board and National Intelligence Collection Board, and the Intelligence Community Analytic Ombudsman from 2019 to 2021. Dr. Zulauf also served as the director of Analytic Integrity and Standards. He was also the first ODNI chair on the faculty of the National Intelligence University from 2012 to 2015. He is a retired naval intelligence officer with a combat tour in Afghanistan. Dr. Zulauf earned a bachelor's degree from Wittenberg University in political science and history and earned a master's degree in comparative politics and a doctorate in international relations from Indiana University. And today he's coming to speak to us in his own personal capacity as president of IAFIE, to talk about moral courage and intelligence. Welcome, Dr. Barry Zulauf.
Thanks very much, Mike, and to all my friends out there in media land. Happy to do this. And yes, I do want to emphasize I'm doing this in my personal capacity. I'm not representing ODNI or the DNI or the intelligence community or the Boy Scouts or the Lutheran Church in America. It's just me. That having been said, I want to speak for 15 or 20 minutes and get as much of a conversation with you as possible. I've been thinking for a long time about the role of intelligence in our profession. And by that, I mean intelligence professionals. I'm a 37-year veteran of intelligence. I've been an all-source analyst all those years. And I'm thinking about the way that moral intelligence sets us apart from mere mortals. What we do is not easy. We're expected to do something that most Americans, most people in whatever countries we come from don't do. And that means that we are expected to be at our best when we put together our expertise gained from our academic experience and from our life experiences together with occasionally acts of courage. And I'll talk about what I mean by that, because I mean it in a particular way. If you want to do some reading, Rollo May, R-O-L-L-O-M-A-Y, wrote a classic back in 1975, The Courage to Create. He's talking about how knowledge workers, like intelligence analysts, deal with the presence of challenges and constraints in their lives. Dealing with difficult situations that call on us to exercise courage is not something bad. It's essential to the creative process in work like ours. That book is a collection of essays, some of them by May, some of them by others. And the first one, the first essay is a nod to Paul Tillich, someone whose name we may know, whose one of his seminal works was The Courage to Be, talking about existentialism. May, in this first essay, stresses that courage is dialectical. What do I mean by that? It's not just the absence of fear in what we do. but rather it is the presence of fear in our professional lives and what we do in the face of that fear. Here's a quote from him. "We express ourselves by creating. Creativity is a necessary sequel of being." That's the reference to Tillich. In order to be creative, we have to face situations that require us to act in the face of opposition, whether it's from our colleagues, from our organizations, however wide you want to cast a circle, from other countries. And we have to face in what we do from time to time, maybe not every day, but from time to time, fear about the results. That's central to our work. That's what helps make us creative. Now, the question is, how do we know when it's the time to show courage, and what kind of courage do we have to show? All right? Hold that question there. Courage can take many different forms. Most intelligence officers never receive public fame. It's not known what they do. And in most of their lives, they're not usually expected to summon courage. Some do. CIA's Memorial Wall, where if you've been in the entryway there, you see the stars, or other installations all around the intelligence community, honor those intelligence professionals who have made the ultimate sacrifice in life or limb. Many today, as we speak here, in comfortable circumstances, are putting themselves in harm's way, even as we speak, and that's always going to be the case. But that kind of physical courage, that's not the only way to show courage. Analysts, people who live in offices or cubicles, as the case may be, can show analytic courage any day. It can happen often in a career. It can happen maybe only once in a career, but I'm fairly sure it will happen to every single one of us as we work through our lives. And the courage can happen any day, and it's not necessarily sparked by a single event or a single issue. It could be something that we generate over the course of our careers as we become more and more known, more and more influential. And we learn a little bit more, as has been the case in, as I said, my 37 years of service. Physical courage, that's one thing. And I'll talk about some of those instances, and then I'll come back to moral courage, which is more the day-to-day. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Back when I was in DEA, in the 1990s, we a different world, a different universe, far, far away. We were focusing on cartels, Latin American cartels, bringing drugs and violence into the United States. There was an individual, if anyone's on the line, who remembers Carlos Castaño. And I think I saw there was at least two people that I know from DEA days there. I got myself cited by name in the Colombian press, in Semana, which is the Colombian version of Time magazine, I guess. What I had done is I had delivered what was open source testimony that DEA had given to Congress over the years to a researcher who was working for the Congressional Research Service, and she mistakenly gave that as a public talk, and it ended up in the press, where I, by name, was accusing Carlos Castaño of being a murderous right-wing drug-dealing thug, which he was. He wrote a letter to me. He wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the United States. He wrote a letter to the Justice Minister in Colombia saying, in essence, if Mr. Zulauf wants to come to Colombia again and show me the evidence that he has about me, that I'm a drug-dealing, murderous, right-wing thug, let him show it to me, and I'll convince him otherwise. So that's a threat. I didn't let it deter me. I'd been to Colombia before. I've been to Colombia since then. And I have to tell you that he is now the late Carlos Castaño, and I'm here. I was right about what I said. He was a murderous thug. He deserved to be identified as such. And that took a little bit of courage. I don't think I would have chosen to have it published in Semana, but okay, it happened, but I stuck by it. Different issue, much later. As a 50-year-old reserve intelligence officer, I volunteered for duty in Afghanistan, the combat tour that Mike referred to early on. I was a trained targeting officer. ISAF, the International Security Assistance Force, needed trained targeteers. Their targeting function by which I mean kinetic targeting of individuals, right? Not targeting weapons in a tactical situation that needed to be straightened out. I went there, I volunteered, I brought good tradecraft into this situation, during the course of which I exposed myself to enemy fire on numerous occasions, sometimes willingly, a couple of times I would prefer to not have had it happen. It's not your usual intelligence gig. That's not sitting in a cubicle producing PowerPoints. But I did that because I thought that would make it possible for Commander ISAF, to pursue just war in kinetic targeting, to make sure that the targets that were being targeted, the individuals, were in fact deserving of it. I thought that was important, and it was worth the risk. If I was a little bit older, I don't think I would have done it. All right, so moral courage. What forms do moral courage take? My friend Jordan Peterson published 12 rules recently. I want to cite rule number 8. Rule number 8 is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. What does this mean? In Jordan's world, in Jordan's view, the world is constituted on the base of truth, right? And faith, in his view, is the willingness to say what's true in the face of consequences. In other words, if you believe something to be true and you have reason to believe that you're going to face undue consequences, you have to have the willingness to say those things. And then things will happen. And those things may or may not be good for you in the short run. But here's the benefit that's held out. I'll come to that in a second. The benefit is in the long run. Ordinary mortals, ordinary human beings, know that you shouldn't say things that's going to get you in trouble. That's common wisdom. That's why most people are willing, and it seems more and more these days, willing to lie, or at least not tell the complete truth when it's not convenient, when it's not expedient. Even little children know this. Little children know that if you tell the truth, you're going to get in trouble. So the lesson that they learn sometimes is to not tell the truth. That is, until you get caught, and then the consequences are even worse. Regular people remember that lesson as they get older. They carry it into their regular lives. How to be expedient with the truth. That is not a good long-term strategy, because you're going to get caught. You'll get a bad reputation. It's also not the right thing to do. We intelligence analysts are trained the opposite. We're supposed to provide the truth, even when it's inconvenient. In fact, that's when it's more important for us to tell the truth, when it's not something that management wants to hear. We're the only function of state that's built just for that purpose. Every other element of a government is going to be either partisan, like the legislature, there's 2 different parties, or elements of government that are responsible for departments who want something. They're not going to be objective, right? We have to be. That's why we exist. We have to have faith as intelligence professionals, I believe, that what will happen when we tell the truth is best in the long run. It might not be good for you in the short run, and I'll talk about that a little bit some more. But that's why we have to have, as intelligence professionals, courage fortified by faith in the truth, right? So let me talk a little bit about consequences. I'm speaking here about career consequences. Jordan Peterson talks about his experiences on college campuses. You can Google him. He's all over YouTube. You can see what he talks about, or if you follow him, you know what this is all about. How he speaks on, and other people, not just him, speak on college campuses, and they face unpleasant receptions. Peterson talks about speaking on campus and the zombies come pounding on the doors, trying to get him, trying to drag him out the windows. What he's talking about is when he speaks uncomfortable truth to people that don't necessarily want to hear it, the response is often violent, or at least unpleasant at the time that it takes place. He says that for him as an individual, and I share this as well, if what you're saying is something that you firmly believe is the case, you need to say it anyway, despite the short-term consequences. The alternative is worse. The alternative means that you're giving in to some bully in the workplace, or some false prophet of ideology, or some political demons. The lodestar here has to be the truth that you're expressing on the basis, in our case, of our training as intelligence analysts. Sometimes even we analysts are going to go through a little slice of hell, either from the senior analyst or from the department head or from other intelligence professionals or the consumers. But we have to maintain our adherence to the truth and show our courage, because that's what it means to be an intelligence professional. It's also more important for us than in many professions, because on the basis of what we say and do, or what we don't say, or what we don't do, people live and die. Organizations live and die. Countries are born. Countries are failed to be born because of the things that we say. We need to make sure that what we say is grounded in truth. I'm talking at a sort of elevated level here. Let me give you a solid example, just in case you can't figure this out. I talked about being a targeteer in Afghanistan. What I was doing is I was putting together intelligence from multiple sources on specific individuals. Mike Ard is in charge of an IAD production factory in Kandahar, right? So I will have his picture, I'll have his voice exemplar, I'll have the intelligence saying that he's responsible for doing this, I'll have made sure it's fresh, and I will take this information to ComISAF, and I would sit knee to knee with him and brief him personally on each individual. And he, using his authority under the rules that were in place for ISAF, would say, this person can be put on the targeting list, or this person can't be put on the targeting list. That was done on the basis of solid intelligence. We did this not every day, but maybe every 3 or 4 days during the course of regular rhythm. Sometimes I had to wake him up in the middle of the night and say, we found Mike Ard, we didn't know he was here, we need you to agree to have him targeted now, right? And if you've ever had to wake up a 4-star infantry officer at 2:30 in the morning with something like that, you know that takes a little bit of moral courage. Not a lot, because he knew that was my job, and I wouldn't face consequences for waking him up. If I wasted his time, I would face consequences. After I had done this for him for a couple of months, there came a time when, I don't know why he chose this person, but he did. I briefed him on the specific individual, and he said, rather than approved or disapproved, as he normally did, he said, I don't know, Commander, what do you think? That put me on the spot. I had a nanosecond to consider. I can do a couple of things. I can be a typical intelligence analyst and say, well, we have this quality information, we're not sure. We have, other information. If I had done that, his trust in me as a targeting officer would have evaporated, and he might not have listened to anything else I said again. What I had to do is make a call. Not just random, but I had to make a call based on good tradecraft. I had to have confidence in my work up to that point, and I did. I was confident. I knew that this person deserved to be targeted, so I said, with a nanosecond delay, I said, yes, sir, target him twice. Easy to say, but I will tell you, not so much anymore, but for a long time after I came back from Afghanistan, I saw that guy's face in my dreams, and I knew it was right. I knew it was right, but I knew that it was me who brought an end to that person's career. All right, types of courage, other types of courage. Most often we talk about courage in the context of our mission, which is to tell decision makers what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Or put it another way, we have to give objective assessments about the world to the most important people in the world. And I will say here, I've never been a PDB briefer, so my hat's off to them, the people that have to face the president every other day. In that context, intelligence is not just an exchange of papers, or it's not an academic exercise. It can be interpersonal combat. Analysts can be at the very pointy end of the analytics sphere, telling officials, sometimes face to face, that their beloved policy is flawed and it's not going to turn out the way they want it to be, no matter how much they want it to be so. That's a difficult situation to be in. We can get criticized as analysts right then and there for doing that. We can get criticized in public or in semi-public when the information comes out that happened. And that criticism can be harsh, and that criticism can be unfair, and that criticism can have career consequences for individuals. And that's unfortunate, but this is the life that we have chosen. Those are the words of Hyman Roth, one of my moral heroes. This is the life that we've chosen, or this is the job that we've chosen. I'll give you an example of this. Now, again, I'm not speaking as the ombudsman. I'm not speaking for ODNI, but when I was the ombudsman, I did a report. If you want to see it, I'm not going to talk about it here. You can Google it. My last name, it's fairly uncommon, and the word ombudsman, it'll come up, and you can see the substance. But I want to talk about the moral courage aspect of this. When I was given that assignment, or when I was asked by the Intelligence Committee to produce that report, I could have said no. I could have avoided it, right? Could have gone someplace else. But everybody who spoke to me, previous ombudsmen, people in the hierarchy that I trusted, my mentors told me, yes, you physically can do that. You can walk away. But that's your responsibility. That's your job. It's the life that you've chosen. You have to do this, even though you know, and I knew at the time, that it's going to be unpleasant. And it was. I mean, I had to testify before the Senate. I had to go to the DNI, and I have to say to him that I found that there was misbehavior going on. And I don't have it anymore. I put it, it's in my lockbox. I wish I had it for a prop, but I'll use this. I had typed out a letter of resignation and predated it, and it was in my pocket when I briefed it to the DNI. And I thought that was going to be the end. I thought he would fire me, and I was going to beat him to the punch. I was going to say, no, you don't. I retire. Now, as it happened, he didn't fire me. So moral conviction helped there. In situations like that, what do we base our courage on? When we face criticism from other analysts or from our bosses, or if we face criticism from our customer, or even Jordan Peterson's zombies, when we speak sometimes, crowds will form around us. The lodestar of our work as intelligence analysts has to be, and the source of our analytic courage has to be our analytic integrity expressed through bulletproof tradecraft. We cannot play with words. We cannot shade meaning. We have to be exactly straightforward. We have to be exactly objective. We have to be exactly unbiased in what we produce. It's vital for us as intelligence analysts. And in times of controversy with the boss or with other analysts or whatever the case may be, it's even more vital. We have to rest on that. So it's bulletproof tradecraft, faith in the truth of that. That's what we rest our courage on. Anything other than that is just bravado. If we don't really know what we're talking about, we're just going in there blind, and that's not courage. That's just bravado. We do have to choose our words carefully, especially if we're in a brief for a briefie situation. Words and phrases that we know the boss doesn't want to hear, ways that things can be put together. We don't want to be entirely confrontational because we do want the boss to listen to what we have to say. I'm not talking about that. That's packaging. That's acceptable. We have to pay attention to timing. If we can, give the information that we have to the boss, if it's negative information, before the decision gets made or before the act gets made, because otherwise it looks like we're just carping after the fact. And then stick-to-itiveness, being able to continue with a point that's necessary to be delivered, even if it's unfavorable. I'll give one example here, and my DEA colleagues will know about this. Starting September 12th, 2001, that is the day after the 9/11 attacks, there was interest on the part of the Congress in bringing an element of DEA into the intelligence community. And I was the liaison between DEA and the intelligence communities at the time. That was not a popular view in DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration. Most of DEA wanted to stay what it was, a small police organization with a clear mission, not having overlap with the intelligence community. That's the wrong thing for the country, because DEA had information on narco-terrorism, the connection between drug trafficking and terrorism that needed to be shared. Many people in the DEA didn't want it done. There was some opposition from some of our mission partners, but it was the right thing to do. So it took an act of persistence. It took 5 years of working through the issues, explaining them to people, not being confrontational, trying to build processes that eventually resulted, and I was in the middle of this, in creation of what is now the Office of National Security Intelligence in 2006. That's the IC's intelligence community component. Not everybody gets to do that. I did. It was the right thing to do for DEA. It was the right thing to do for the country. It didn't have the best consequences for me. I am obviously no longer at DEA. In anything like this, we have to let our tradecraft be our guide. Our analysis has to reflect our best assessment of the information available to us with the strongest possible tradecraft, not our personal opinions. And it's hard as human beings to keep that out. Now, what facts change, the world changes out there, and we have to be able to change our assessments and not hold on to our opinions forever, not dig our heels in. Ordinary mortals do that. They hold on to positions long after they should have been gotten rid of. We can't afford to do that. We're expected and paid to not do that. We're expected to change our views when necessary, and we are trained to be able to do that by using structured analytic techniques and a whole host of other things that I teach my students at Georgetown. And I don't know, but I think Mike and his colleagues at Johns Hopkins, although it's another university, I bet they probably teach those things as well. We have to revise our thinking if new information comes around. That takes courage and humility to say to yourself, okay, I was wrong. And to be able to have faith that even though that may be uncomfortable, that'll be best in the long run. Another reference to Rollo May here before I close. There's a tension between convictions, which are important to be held, and doubt. That tension is sometimes attempting to resolve that tension is the highest form of moral courage. Contemplate this dialectic for a minute, if you will. Someone who is fully convinced of all of his or her beliefs is perfectly rigid and adverse to anything new, probably not a good intelligence analyst. On the other hand, someone who is what Rollo May calls pan-dubious, that is doubtful of everything, skeptical of everything, is in danger of becoming paralyzed and not able to make a decision about what goes forward. Unchecked doubt ruins initiative, it ruins trust, and it ruins hope. A creative analyst balances those two. Conviction when it's appropriate to do so, and doubt when it's appropriate to show doubt, and courage to speak up about that, whichever way the dynamic flies. This matters because we're trained and we're paid to think critically and objectively as analysts. We have the tools. We're trained to do this, which is something that ordinary people aren't trained to do, and we have to make sure that we have something important to say when we do this. Otherwise, it's, as I said before, speaking of you, if it's not based in tradecraft, is just bravado. That doesn't help anything. The tradecraft has to always be there, and you might not be always right. You might be always learning, but that's what you're paid to do, and it takes years maybe to become a true expert. The mythical 10,000 hours, whatever that translates to. That's intellectual curiosity, not automatically accepting an analytic line, always asking questions, always challenging the senior analyst. That's difficult to do. Always checking your own assumptions. That's difficult to do, and having to do that regularly. And finally, the last thing, remember, we don't have a monopoly on the truth. what it says on the wall of the lobby at CIA is, "Ye shall know the truth, and it will set you free." We don't have a monopoly on the truth, but we do have a license to pursue it. And let me stop there, and we'll take the conversation further.
Great. Thank you very much, Barry, for the compelling remarks. And I want to remind everyone, please, we're going to field your questions in a few here. Please put them in the chat or the Q&A functions, and we'll get right to them. One thing I'd like, I mean, it comes through, the tension between a conviction and doubt. That's, I think, very important. Obviously, we're trained to say, "I don't know." If we don't know something, in fact, there's a certain expectation that we'll say it. This isn't appreciated in every walk of life. That we say, "I don't know," we're supposed to be the expert, correct?
That's true. And we don't serve our masters well. I'll say masters because to shorthand, we don't serve them well if we try to give the impression that we know everything. That just because we're in intelligence, we have access to all perfect information, and we have the answers. There's nothing wrong with saying, "I don't know," but the other part of that is, "I don't know, but I'll find out." If pressed, there's a second part of the question, which maybe you're going to get around to. What if the customer says, "Well, what do you think?" All right. So then we're being asked to directly. All right. What do you think? What are your views? We are paid to give assessments. We are paid to give views. But what we have to really guard against, and here's the insurance, is to not let the customer think that our views are facts. We have to make sure that they're clear. This is a fact. That's what we know for sure. This is what we think. If we do that, we're okay.
One situations that come up, intelligence analysts have to be collaborative. That's part of our mission as well. Even though we often need to act on our convictions, but we do also have to function in a group. How do we balance this? Are there times when we need to compromise something on our positions, on the basis of getting a product out the door, getting something that'll be useful to the customer? How do we balance this?
Well, dealing with disagreement with other people in the work group, or differences of interpretation between you and the senior managers, that's good as long as there's a healthy what we call challenge culture, where someone can say to you, I think you're off base because of X, Y, and Z, and that causes you to reflect. Maybe make your argument a little bit stronger, maybe look for some other evidence. That works with colleagues, and that works with management as well. If there's that healthy challenge culture where people will raise things with you, you'll take them on board, and you can produce a better product. If there's a culture of fear, if what's going on is someone is telling you, well, there's an institutional line, an analytic line. This is what we here in Acme Intelligence Agency believe, and you're not writing about that, so you're wrong. You can't bring that forward. That's not a healthy culture. And if you truly have done, here's a very difficult situation. If you truly have done the bulletproof intelligence tradecraft assessment, and you truly believe that you're right, and the other analysts or the SIO or whoever it is wrong, you have to, in my view, carry through with the courage of your convictions and not change just because someone else is saying there's a different way. You have to carry that forward. Now that can have consequences. You don't, at the low level, you might get reassigned. You don't get your product out or whatever, or it could be worse. It could be, well, you're no longer working for Acme Intelligence Agency. Only you can be the judgment inside yourself whether what you're arguing, the position that you're taking is worth doing that. That's a tough situation to be in. But my general advice is, if you're right and you know you're right, don't give in.
Very, very good. Let's bring on another question. I want to get to our guest questions, but I know you've written about this, and I know our audience is quite interested in even your article too. In Studies in Intelligence is a good place to go for this on the politicization issue, right? I mean, is there ever a time when this may be justified by senior management, perhaps? I mean, I'm thinking of like an example of where, from years back, Richard Helms had to resolve an issue with the difference between DOD and CIA on the order of battle in Vietnam, right? Mm-hmm. And they had to go with a number, which wasn't with what his analysts thought. Are there times when this is justified?
No. I'll expand on that. So what Helms does in his writings is he takes the line among others that if I had gone right to the president and said your position is wrong, our position is right, and I'm not compromising, that nothing else that came out of the agency to the president would have been paid attention to. Right? So he's judging an interpersonal relationship, right? And that's sort of a different category. And someone who's briefing the president or the admiral or the general on a day-to-day basis, kind of what I said with ComISAF, right? When he was asking me, should this person be targeted? Right? You have to deal with that personal dynamic. But I'll reframe the question: should an intelligence analyst politicize intelligence? No. There's no justification for that. What we're expected to do by law under IRTPA section 1019, 1020, and 1017 is we're supposed to be objective. We're supposed to be devoid of political considerations. We can't let our personal views or our political views intrude. We have to play the information straight. Now, I don't want to talk a whole lot about politicization, but we're not supposed to be advocates. We're not taking a side. We're not advancing a policy position. We're trying to objectively judge those positions. And objectivity, in fact, can be compromised if we're not open to other facts, other points of view, and be able to change our convictions when necessary. It's a bad thing for objectivity. It's a bad thing for having a challenge culture inside the analytic workforce.
I want to get to some of our audience questions, and here's I'm going to paraphrase something that David is asking here. Okay, so you're in a situation where management has obviously decided on an analytic line. The organization has a strong analytic line on something. If you feel that this is sort of a situation where we've been cooking the books, so to speak, what do you do? As an analyst, how do you, what are your options here? How do you, do you just put up with it so you don't rock the boat? Are there other alternatives available to you?
There are many alternatives. You can choose to not rock the boat and go along with it, and you can compromise your own intellectual integrity and write what the boss tells you to do. You can do all those kinds of things. You can act a little bit on the defensive and say, "Can you reassign me to another portfolio?" And of course, that could have career consequences. But again, I refer to my earlier position. If you really do believe that you are on good tradecraft foundation, if you really are reflecting objective assessment and not just your own personal views that happen to be at odds with the customer or with your manager, you need to stick to it and not change just because someone is saying, "Well, this is policy." That will have. I know that will have consequences. That get out of everything from get out of my office to get out of my organization. But you've got to be the judge of when you have that uh, when you need to show that moral courage based on faith in the truth, right? And be willing to take the consequences. I talked about courage before. It's not the absence of fear. It's action in the face of fear when you know you're right. At least in this country, usually in a situation like that, all we have to demonstrate is moral courage. It's our job. Now that's a lot, okay, because we have mortgages and student loans and everything. It's usually our job that's at risk. We don't face physical challenges. This is not the KGB where there are physical challenges to objecting to the boss.
I'll paraphrase this one quickly from John, who was referring to the DHS's Inspector General report. You might recall what I'm talking about, Barry, on the reporting prior to January 6th of 2021. And according to the report, this was a news report interpretation of it, that they had failed to report on preparations for January 6th because presumably a backlash to reporting that was published on a protest in 2020 in Portland. Did DHS overcompensate for a backlash in reporting? Do you think that this is a systemic problem in the intelligence community? Can moral courage resolve this?
Well, I mean, I don't want to pass judgment on DHS. I don't have insight into what all that was, and really all I know about it at this point is what's in the press. But it's an object lesson, I think, isn't it, for what happens when an organization, wherever it is, an intelligence agency or a company, puts organizational pressure on analysts of whatever variety and attempts to cause them to change their views, report on something that isn't there, or don't report on something that is there. It creates an environment in which it makes it difficult for the analysts to do good, play it straight by the book tradecraft. And what happens is the analyst is more likely to be forced into a situation of having to show moral courage, which ought to be the exception rather than the rule. Right? If it has to happen, ubiquitously across a whole agency over a long period of time, that's an unhealthy agency. If it happens occasionally, that's sort of normal, and it'll happen in any analyst's career once or twice maybe. But if it happens all the time, you might want to look at where you're working.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Here's another question about the on strategic warning. What are our responsibilities as analysts if political leaders simply won't accept the strategic warning? How are we supposed to deal with that?
Well, I mean, in this country at least, and in most democracies that I know of, and I see John Pyrick is on here. Maybe he knows otherwise. Our responsibility ends with delivery. We're not responsible to make decision makers act on the basis of what we say. In fact, intelligence increasingly is only one of several streams of information coming to decision makers. They listen to us, they listen to their church, they listen to their political party, they listen to social media, they listen to their spouse, whatever the case may be. We're just one source of information, a pretty good one. But there's no obligation on policymakers to do what we say or what we seem to think that they should do. In fact, we're not supposed to give recommendations. We're supposed to just give an assessment of what the threats are. It's for other people to make policy recommendations. If we can deliver, that's when our responsibility ends. We can't really be responsible. There's no way we could be held responsible for whether the decision makers acted or not.
Follow-up was, what oversight is there on the National Intelligence Priority Framework process outside of the IC and the policy community? Can you answer that?
I'm not sure what that has to do with moral courage, and
not sure either.
I'm not sure what it means. What it means. I mean, the National Intelligence Priorities Framework. I mean, maybe the questioner can rephrase it. I mean, it's a list of priorities by country and topics that the community is supposed to focus on. it's used for that purpose. It's used as it says. It's to set priorities for national intelligence. That doesn't have anything to do with moral courage, I don't think.
I'd like to, Andres asked a question here, and do you believe that the Ratcliffe's letter was a fair characterization of your report?
The letter that he issued at the same time as the
that's right. It would have been the same time. January 7th. He has the date here. I don't know when exactly it came out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'm not the ombudsman anymore. I'm not speaking to the ombudsman, but that was his letter. He was giving his views as the director of national intelligence. There's a line or two in there that he quoted from the report, and he did give me the grace of asking me, "Is this accurate?" And where he quoted me in the report is accurate.
Thank you. And by the way, Jim, thanks for your comments on the compromise and collaboration and intelligence. Those were appreciated. Getting to another question on, we hear a lot about whistleblowers lately, and gets back to what some of our discussion in the chat maybe is hinting at, is like when people feel they need to go outside of official channels, outside of the chain of command, and make a stance, make a moral stance on an issue which they consider to be abuse. What options do analysts have for things like this?
Whistleblowers tend to get exalted, and I would ask, exalted by whom? Exalted by the media? Is that what you want as a professional, to be exalted by one of our least trusted institutions on the basis of public opinion polls? Not by me. I mean, whistleblowers should not be exalted. Now, there's capital W whistleblowers and there's small w whistleblowers. There is a formal whistleblowing process, which I'll talk about here. Maybe that's the point of the question. For intelligence professionals, there's defined rules. You can give information to the inspectors general in your agencies or to the ICIG. There's a whole process for getting what you believe to be malfeasance to their intention. And the IGs have a process in extremis to be able to share that information through proper channels with congressional overseers. Also, if there's a tradecraft issue, you can always talk to Analytic Integrity and Standards, an office that I used to have, or to the Analytic Ombudsman in agencies. If it's just a tradecraft issue, if it's not a waste, fraud, and abuse kind of issue. Just running to a reporter or to a website or social media because you feel personally aggrieved or you came out on the wrong end of a policy decision or something, that is not moral courage. It's also not policy, and depending on how this actually plays out, it could actually be illegal to do so. It's the opposite. Moral courage, let me say that again, it is not courage to going into the media. In fact, it's the opposite. Moral courage in this case would be having the courage of your convictions to stay in the system and drive through the system as it exists. If you're so sure you're right, prove it inside the system, work through the existing system. We could have, we should have another one of these talks just on whistleblowers, Mike.
Well, and also unnamed government sources who are very frequently reported in the press, and obviously giving out classified information. It's and it doesn't seem like there's much compunction on the part of the media to really identify who these people are, and what kind of, and you don't also get any sense of, well, is you're getting one side of it. It's obviously somebody's using classified information for their own gain.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion about intelligence analysts have a code of ethics. We have by statute responsibilities for tradecraft, right? There's nothing similar to that in journalism. journalism schools will say, yes, there are such things as journalistic ethics, but they don't contemplate dealing with those codes taught in journalism schools. And if somebody has an example of one that does this that I haven't seen, please share it with me. Don't talk to what you do when you're giving classified information. That journalists have another set of priorities that they're facing. They're not interested in security. They're not interested, at least not directly, in the national interest. Their priorities and their responsibilities are to their publisher or to their readers or whatever the case may be. They're interested in getting information out. They're not under the same set of obligations, and they're not under any obligation whatsoever to be objective. So none of those things that operate on intelligence professionals operate on that side of the equation.
Yeah, Cindy had something on the perhaps offering a little bit of a more clarification on the NIPF, and when priorities change, right? Analysts need to. We have national priorities set. There's a process in which we go about this. It's an iterative process, when it happens, but there's times when it changes, and analysts need to be able to make that point publicly, or not. Within their channels, when we need to be emphasizing something else now, because obviously things have changed.
I wouldn't think that ventilating something in the pages of a newspaper would be the way to change priorities. There's a process, which I talk about in another environment. There's a process by which the National Intelligence Priorities Framework gets updated and changed. That's another instance of okay, if you think this needs to be changed, get yourself assigned to a working group, make the argument why, Ruritania needs to be higher than Ouagadougou, right? You want to make that argument? You think you have the evidence? Get in there and do that. Right. Media is not the place for that to happen. Now, do people talk about that? Sure. Academics publish when they say, we need to pay more attention to China or more attention to Colombia, whatever the case may be. Yeah, people do that all the time. But that's not the way to actually change the process. The way to change the process is by working through the inside the existing system. And if you feel so strongly about it, make your case.
Another question we have is, what about the obligation that we have? And I think that former military senior officers have an obligation to consider what they represented in their past career. Senior intelligence officers have an obligation to consider what they represented, in fact, to the public in their career. How do we balance this between our right to free speech and then our obligations to the institution when we speak out in public?
There's another topic for another in-depth discussion that you should host, Mike. But there was a time when military officers, by tradition, were apolitical, right? Didn't register to vote, weren't members of political parties, didn't speak, right? I'd love to be able to read an inside biography of General Marshall. You can't find it. What he actually thought at post-retirement is not there. Same thing with intelligence officers. When I was a young analyst back in the Stone Age, intelligence officers, either current serving officers or retired, didn't go on television and pontificate or didn't have opinion columns. That just wasn't the case. I think not to talk negatively about anyone's constitutional right to free speech. We all have that as citizens. But if you go and you speak and you say, I'm Admiral so-and-so, or I'm General so-and-so, that implies that you have some kind of specialized knowledge. If you're talking about submarines, or if you're talking about tanks, great, I'll listen to you. If you're talking about public policy, then you're just Billy. It's not any special view. When formers go out and they say, I am Billy, the director of former intelligence agency, that gives them, that's an attempt by either them and or the media outlet to give them additional gravitas, which they might not necessarily have. And If you want to get into people who feel even more strongly about this than me, I would point you to John Gentry. He's written a number of articles in the International Journal of Intelligence and Counterintelligence about formers attempting to operate in the public policy environment.
Yeah, thank you for that. This has really been a great discussion today, and I'd like to thank Dr. Barry Zulauf for being with us and talking about moral courage. We'd love to have you back, Barry, to speak to us more about this. It's obviously, there's lots of aspects of the discussion that we could be getting more at. Also, I'd like to thank our audience today for such interesting and to the point questions. Appreciate that. We will have a few more Inside Intelligence programs coming up in January. We'll be talking about Qatar after the World Cup, the impact of that event on Qatar and the Gulf region. Also, we'll be talking about where do we get alternative ideas from. We'll be talking with the political scientist, John Mueller, about that. So we're setting these dates up. Keep your eye out for notifications on this. And I'd like to thank you all for being with us. And again, thank our guest, Dr. Barry Zulauf, for his great presentation today.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you. We'll see you next time, and happy holidays, everybody.